You're listening to the New Jersey Real Estate Investor Podcast. We talk about all topics related to being a real estate investor in the Garden State, based on our experiences with buying, selling, managing, and building rentals. So together, we can all be better investors. Now, here is your host, Pete Tverdov.
Okay, welcome back to the New Jersey Real Estate Investor Podcast, guys. Very happy to have you back here with Andrew Spina, my number two. And we are going to talk today about, well, I call it the green card inspection, but Andrew, what do you call it?
DCA State Inspection.
Right, the DCA State Inspection. So
what does DCA stand for, Pete?
Division of Consumer Affairs, I believe.
Close. Department of Consumer Affairs. Man, why you got to put me on the spot? For everyone just like, they're like, all right, I'm not listening to this episode. All right, these guys don't know what they're talking about. Department of Community Affairs. So anyway, we're going to talk about the DCA inspection or the green card inspection. And if you're an investor out there who owns basically a 3-family or above, a hotel, multiple dwelling, a boarding house, a massive HOA association, this episode is going to apply to you. And, you know, with respect to our management company, we deal with these inspectors a good amount. So we thought it'd be good to have an episode to kind of just give you guys the rundown of like, you know, what it is, how often. There are some new rule changes about it. There's steps to do, what to look for, so on and so forth. And I think after this, you should feel a lot more confident if you have a state inspection coming up, or maybe you got one of those famous letters taped to the door because no one answered. So anyway, we're going to talk through that. So, and also I could read some information straight off the state website about it as well to kind of help. But so what it is, as I said, is if you own any, they call it a hotel or multiple dwelling in the state of New Jersey. Anything that's 3 units and above is basically within the state's jurisdiction. It used to be called a green card inspection because when you passed, you got like this green card that had all this information on it. So a lot of old school landlords just call it a green card inspection. The state changed it a couple of years ago. Frankly, I didn't bother to remember the name because everyone calls it a green card inspection anyway, except like the inspectors and the people at the state. So if you talk to somebody who's been a landlord for like 30 years, they'll be like, oh yeah, the green card inspection. Right. Now, how often is this inspection, right? So the state inspects these properties every 5 years. So if you have a 3-family, a 4-family, a 20 unit, a 100 unit, right? They're going to inspect it every 5 years. Now, as a rule of, I wouldn't say rule of thumb, but just like something to know, is the state like on target with like their inspections? Absolutely not.
Right. Yeah. So they're, no disrespect to any state inspector listening, but they would acknowledge that as well. And actually they have at like real estate investor meetings that I've been to. The state's anywhere from like maybe a year behind schedule. Yeah. And during COVID, it was even worse. They were like, I think like 2 or 3 years behind schedule. So they've actually like caught up a little bit, but they're basically a year behind. So when you're buying a piece of property, like that's one of the things you'll do during the due diligence period is to make sure like you have an updated and completed green card. Right? Because like you want to make sure the state has come in to inspect. So historically, they've come in every 5 years. And really, it's been a little frustrating because you don't really get notice. Your tenants, if you don't live there, your tenants will tell you, hey, they'll probably send you a picture like, hey, we got this letter taped to the door that they came today at 10 a.m. and no one was there to answer the door because people work for a living. Call them to reschedule. Right?
They'll often post a notice. Sometimes they will post a notice stating, hey, your inspection's coming up the 23rd. But usually that's posted at the rental property and you don't get much formal notice. Maybe that depends on if all your information's up to date on the registration, because that's another thing you have to do when you own a property of 3 units or more. You have to kind of register with them, I believe annually, just to make sure all the owner contact information is relevant.
So that's a good point. Why don't you, because you handle the registrations. So for those of you who don't know, Andrew's the director of our management business and operations. So he handles like a lot of that stuff. Yeah. Maybe you could talk briefly about like setting up the registrations and the certificate of registration.
Yeah,
with these units.
It's pretty straightforward. It's all done online through the DCA portal. The website and the online presence isn't too user-friendly, but if you review it and dig around, you'll find out what you need to do. But basically, you're just registering the property to the assigned owner. That'll be you. You're putting in your contact information. You're putting in all the pertinent information that they need. And then you pay a very nominal fee. And then that's something you'll be required to do. I believe it's every year. And that's the information they'll use with the inspections.
Yeah, so I'm actually reading the state's
guidance on this. And usually because there's a registered agent that they put down. So our property management company, like Tverdov Housing, is a registered agent. So what winds up happening, guys, is we get these mailed to our office. And it's like, hey, we have to do the updated registration for 123 Main Street. Right. And then we go and do it. And then, we log it in our property management portal. So for those of you who don't have a property management company and you do it yourself, or maybe you haven't done it, you want to get it registered, because actually that, I know I'm jumping ahead here, but that's one of the things you'll fail inspection on, is if you don't have the certificate of registration displayed in the common area with, as of the latest registration. Because frankly, we see it on some of the places we manage, because, truthfully, we get these, we save them online, and sometimes if the stars are aligning, we'll have someone go to the property who's doing a showing or whatever, hey, just put this latest one in the hallway. But if you don't have that, you won't pass inspection. So yeah, the registration, it's annoying, but it is important. Now, there are some new rule changes that you guys need to know about. And these came out about a year ago. Okay. And I think they're good rule changes, but basically they now have tiered inspection schedules. So what this basically means is, in a nutshell, if your property is sparkling and in great shape, guys, and the inspector comes and there's no violations found, or any violations that were found were fixed on the first reinspection, the state will not come back for 7 years.
I didn't know that. That's great.
Yeah, that's awesome. So that rewards good behavior from good landlords. Conversely, if you have all violations and they've had to do 3 reinspections, they will now inspect your property every 2 years.
Yeah.
Now, I do wonder, are they really going to come back in 2 years?
Usually we have to pursue them for reinspection.
Well, no, I understand that.
No, I don't think they will come back every 2 years.
But what I'm saying is, let's say, whatever, we inherit a property like a slumlord, right, who just can't get out of his own way or doesn't want to fix things. And we finally get it fixed on the third or fourth attempt, because he's already had 2 or 3 attempts, right? And we fix it. And they're like, okay, cool, you got a green card for 2025. I wonder if they're really going to come back in 2027 because of how backed up they are.
Exactly. I doubt they would.
They might, right? And if you're listening to this, I don't think that should stop you from trying to have a good property, right? I just don't think that helps. They probably would come back in 2028 though. So it might be 3 years. So basically the new rule change is meant to incentivize people to take really good care of their property, right? Because if you got you could I'm not going to put it on the air, but we got a new 4-family in Piscataway. That's an A property.
Yeah.
All right. So when the state comes by, maybe they'll find something, but they might, the certificate of registration might not be updated because there was, some stuff going on there, but that's a great property, right? So that should get inspected every 7 years.
Yeah.
And then there's other properties where we've had in the past that are disasters.
Yeah.
And if the owner's not updating that stuff or just keeping it a disaster, then, I kind of agree with that. So I think that's an interesting rule change. So Andrew, I'm going to let you talk a little bit about what to look for on these inspections, because I think it'd be good, for people out there to know what the inspector is going to be looking for, and maybe you could actually fix it ahead of time to pass on the first go round.
Yeah. So a lot of the common things they're going to be looking for are the obvious: smoke and CO detectors not being removed. They're going to be checking for self-closing, self-locking door mechanisms on exterior doors. And then sometimes it really depends. I think you can agree with me on this. It depends on the type of inspector you get. Sometimes they're very, I wouldn't say lenient, but they're pretty understanding that, if you show that, listen, we manage the property where it's in our best interest to keep it up to code. And then other times you get inspectors that just hit you with every little thing. And so they'll point out the obvious, fire, CO detectors, but then sometimes they'll go into the basement and say, oh, this partitioning wall is illegal, needs to be removed, you need a building permit. And it goes way beyond just the normal fire safety stuff that you would assume they're going to be looking for. But it's mostly overcrowding sometimes, fire safety, making sure the property's secured, stuff like that.
So, yeah, some of the stuff I have on my list to piggyback on that. Actually, overcrowding, I'm not 100% sure on. That might be a town thing. But with the state, they're most concerned about life safety issues, right? So, for example, the hardwired smoke detectors, they're going to test those. Now, in 3 units and up, the stairwells also have the emergency exit lighting.
Yeah.
So if your property doesn't have that, you're going to need to add it. And so, guys, I'll give you a great example, because we have a client who bought a 3-family house that was built in 2004, has a CO from the town, all that stuff.
The town and the state are two different things. The town doesn't care about common area lighting, right?
Mm-hmm.
The state does. So the irony is we took over management of this property in 2020. 2021, the state comes around. So 21 minus 4 is 17, right? 17 years, state comes around. It's like, hey, there's no emergency exit lighting in here. You failed. And the owner was like irate about it. And I was like, well, the state's right.
Yeah.
You know, it's like we had to install common area emergency exit signs. It's like that's one of the things you'll see in buildings that are 3 units and up. Peeling paint is a big one.
I was just thinking,
right?
Peeling, scraping paint. Yep.
Like lead paint's like a hot topic in New Jersey right now. So they don't want to see peeling paint.
Mold in the bathroom, on the ceilings.
Yeah. Well, yeah, mold issues. They don't want to see any means of egress blocked. So like if you have a door with like a desk in front of it, that'll fail. They don't want to see that. A lot of the properties now, they want to see like the extermination letter.
Yeah,
like
that's true. Like an invoice.
Yeah, like what's the one we just did that like the state required? Do you remember?
Henry Ave.
Yeah, but I mean like the letter. It was basically it was like a spreadsheet of like all the units then that they were like treated. They want to see some sort of letter or invoice from the exterminator company that like you've been exterminated.
That you've
the building.
addressed each unit. Yeah.
Another one, guys, is really the low hanging fruit is like the entry and exit doors. They have to be self-closing, okay? And they have to be self-locking, all right? So your front doors, the back of the knob cannot have like a button or anything to lock it. It needs to be like just a pool cube on the back. So it has to be automatically self-closing and self-locking. So, and this is just my pet peeve. Don't put those ugly arms that go like on top of the door to make it automatically close. Like, you know, like what we do is like
the hinges.
Yeah, we just do self-closing hinges. It's so much nicer looking and they close automatically, guys. But yeah, so the doors have to be self-locking. The knobs have to be self-locking. The front door, the apartment doors need peepholes and they need chains.
Yep, chain guards.
Okay, chain guards. Mm-hmm. And then like Andrew touched on, smoke detectors, carbon. Then there's some other minor stuff too. Extermination letters, they want to see that. They want to see the certificate of registration that I touched on earlier.
Yeah. Sometimes they'll even, if it applies, they'll directly ask the tenants if they're home, like, how is everything? What's going on?
That's true too, yeah.
You're like, oh, the vent above the stove's not working. And then they cite you for that.
Dude, I remember I was doing one, and we have like a really good relationship with, a couple of the inspectors now because they see our face and our name, over and over again. But there was one I was doing with this guy, and he goes to the tenant, like, yeah, anything wrong? She's like, well, now that you mention it, she's like, the windows they're pretty drafty. Like they're pretty, blah, blah, blah. And now the windows, like they closed, they were fine. And so that comment cost me like $4,000 in windows.
Yeah.
That, in hindsight, I didn't want to replace because they weren't broken. They were just old wood windows.
The windows, that's a good point. Because sometimes, if I can recall, they'll check the windows to make sure they're locking. And other times they don't pay any attention to it.
That's what I'm saying.
It depends on the inspector.
Do you remember the one property? I mean, I know which one it was, but where he, like the French doors, he wanted them to go on like that old Victorian home.
Oh, on Livingston?
Yeah. And then.
Yeah, that was actually a good example. We had a State DCA inspection at a 4-unit building. The building itself is a painted lady Victorian. It's a very old home.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Beautiful,
looking.
Classic example of old New Brunswick architecture. And this inspector came in and he must have been in a bad mood, but he was throwing out all sorts of violations. Side note, I looked at the certificate and he wasn't even supposed to be due for an inspection. Like it was before the 5-year period. So my point being, you really can't push back, but you have to look very thoroughly what's going on. But they had a beautiful front door, and he was saying this front door, which was glass and wood, all articulate carved, he said this door has to be removed. You need a metal door. And I was explaining, listen, this will just ruin the aesthetic of the house. We can't really do that. And I escalated to a supervisor. Long story short, a supervisor came in, kind of dismissed a number of things that this guy had brought up. And that doesn't happen a lot, but you kind of have to, when you get that violation list, you want to review it carefully. You want to look at any previous inspections you've had, just because they're not perfect. They make mistakes too.
No, and I was going to touch on this later, but I guess I should touch on it now. The stupidest thing you guys could do is start arguing with the inspector. Mm-hmm. Just like be polite, nod your head, like, no problem.
Get their name and number.
Yeah, and then review it. And then you could, because sometimes, look, they're human too. Like they make mistakes. I had an inspection years ago where the same building where they said you had to do the emergency exit signs. They said the building needed a fire escape.
Right.
And we were like, wait a minute, like there's already two means of egress. There's the stairs, and then like the windows are a second means of egress. And it turned out he was wrong.
Yeah. I would say a good rule of thumb is if you own a property and you get hit one day with a host of issues, maybe just spend some time and review it just to make sure nothing's being duplicated or they're not misstepping here.
Well, especially if the property's in good shape. If you have a rat trap, then you're going to get a 3, 4, 5-page violation list. Sorry, newsflash. Like that's going to happen, and it should happen. Like have better properties, guys. Those of you listening.
Fire paint. That's another one that I just recalled. Sometimes the interior doors have to be, if they're of a certain material, you have to put like fire blocking paint on them.
Oh God.
Yeah.
What if it's like a wood door?
Yeah. That old paint at Lady Victorian, we had to paint some of the interior doors with a fire blocking paint. But like Pete said, don't argue. Take their comments in stride, get their information, wait for the violation list, and then you can address anything you may question.
So tell me a little bit about how scheduling works, like with these inspections. Like walks a listener through how that would work.
So normally, like we said at the beginning, they'll post a notice on the property letting you know the date and time.
Do they ever call us?
I've seldom received a phone call.
Really?
I honestly don't even receive an email.
See, those of you who probably own a couple of these, like especially if they're in the same county, because the inspectors are divided up by county, guys. For those of you who don't know, it's like us. Like again, it's a little different. We own a management company too, and our signs are everywhere in certain towns. Like after a while, the inspectors would just call, and I would save their number.
Yeah,
and then we would say, listen, like if you need to get into any property that we manage, let us know. I remember emailing them like our whole list, and like because when you do that and you show them like how much you're trying to help, then they love you. And then frankly, like they don't turn a blind eye, but like they level with you a little bit. They don't even write up like, hey, are you going to take care of this?
Are you
going to like send me a picture in 2 days? If you take care of it, I won't even,
Yeah.
So anyway, I kind of stole your thunder there. So they don't call you to schedule. So you said they tape something on the door.
They usually tape something on the door. Now keep in mind that the lack of calling may be because we're a registered agent. They may be calling the owner and that's just going into the void. Yeah. So you get aware of the inspection, you go meet them, you walk the property, you give notice to the tenants, then you receive the violation list. Then rescheduling it.
They usually mail the violation list to the owner, I think.
They usually mail it, but we're very proactive.
They actually do they give it to the registered agent too? They might.
They might. Yeah. But regardless, we pursue it. We try to obtain as quick as possible.
Right.
And then as far as the reinspection, they're going to say, well, you can't call us for a reinspection after such and such a date. So let's say you have the inspection January 1st. They're going to say something like, well, and you get all the violations abated, let's say the second week of January, and you call them, they're going to say, well, you got to wait to call us till after the 15th of February because they're so inundated.
I know.
So you have to wait a period of time, then you can call for a reinspection.
And here's what's annoying, guys. And you could talk about this. We had a 4-family we did an inspection on last year, right? And one of the violations was mold in the bathroom.
Oh, yeah, this summer.
Right.
Yeah, and that's actually a good point I want to talk about. So we abated the mold. They came back for a reinspection number of months later.
Yeah. And
the tenant was not venting the bathroom properly, so the mold reappeared in the bathroom, and it was cited again.
Yeah.
And that's a good point, is when you're dealing with especially problematic properties that have maybe some difficult tenants, you could fix all the smoke detectors, fix the mold, but then if enough time goes past, those tenants are potentially removing the smoke detectors because maybe they're smoking in the apartment, they're doing what they shouldn't be, and you get cited again. So it's definitely in your best interest before you have a reinspection you can either do one of two things. You can walk the property maybe a week or a few days before the reinspection to make sure nothing's been tampered with, or you could potentially push out the repair and abatement work until it's closer to that reinspection date.
Yeah,
because
true.
Tenants will. I mean, the most common one is the smoke detectors. They cook in the kitchen, or they're smoking in there.
They'll just pull it down.
They just pull it down after you've already paid someone to put it back up. Yeah. Inspector comes out and says, "You never fixed this." Wait a minute, I did. Now you're chasing the tenant for reimbursement. You're dealing with a third inspection. So I would say, try to do the abatement work close to the reinspection, or at least walk the property before the reinspection. We're actually dealing with that right now.
Yeah.
We have a DCA inspection on the 21st of this month. We're going to have our field technician walk it like 3 days beforehand just to make sure everything's been done, but just to make sure it stays done.
So let me talk to you guys about some best practices to follow during the inspection, okay? So we already talked to you about like what to look for, right? So hopefully you guys know that. And if those things are missing or broken, fix them before you have the inspection because you're going to have to fix them anyway. Mm-hmm. And this is what we do, or our field techs do. When they are inspecting, anything that they're writing down, we just ask them, hey, like, can you let me know what we're writing down? Because we want to take a photo because like we want to get right on this, right? So we take a picture and make a note where the issue is located. Is it outside, in the basement, in the hallway, in apartment 1, apartment 2, and so on and so forth. And then when they're done, like we want to go over our notes with their notes. Like, okay, cool. Like, no problem. We're going to get right on this, right? So this way we have a list of corrections immediately and we don't need to wait for their list that might not come for weeks. Right. Now, to your point, like we might fix the stuff too fast sometimes. And then by the time they come back, like the tenants broke it. But at least like we kind of know what's coming.
I used to, I'm sorry to cut you off. I used to follow the inspector around. And as he was making his violation list, I would literally just ask him, okay, what's that issue? And I would write it down, second floor bedroom.
Exactly.
You know, room to front.
Because guys, sometimes if you don't do that and if you're not there, sometimes you'll get the list. It's really vague. And do you think you could just call up the inspector and talk to him?
Yeah.
No,
you're not going to find it.
Yeah, it's yeah, you're not going to find them.
Talking to somebody else,
right? So
you shadow them, and you in a very polite way, just say, "Okay, no, what's the issue in this front bedroom?" Oh, okay, and you write it down, and then you compare that to the violation list that you receive.
Yeah. Now, if something seems incorrect, like don't start arguing with them in the moment.
No.
Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't be like, well, you could ask questions, but like, so Andrew and I were just talking about this. We had a client for like 4 months who was a management client, terrible fit. Didn't want to fix a thing. Like just, you know,
Should we say his name?
No. What are you, nuts? But anyway, he was upset that we didn't argue with the inspector on the spot and try to negotiate the repairs.
Yeah.
I was like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, and like we talked about, sometimes they're wrong, but like the guy was like so tone deaf to like the condition of his property. Like, yeah of course there's a ton of violations. Like, have you looked inside your apartments?
Yeah.
So like, that's the worst thing that you could do. Because then the inspector's like, oh, you want to be a jerk? No problem.
Yeah.
This is wrong. That's wrong. That's wrong. That's wrong. They can make your life hell, guys.
And and this goes with a lot of even local inspectors. It really depends on the mood you get them, if they're in a good mood or a bad mood. One of the tricks that I used to do is I would try to, and I've told you this for years, I would try to politely and playfully distract. So I would say, oh, like, how long you been doing this? What did you do before this? Oh, you were a firefighter. What's the craziest fire you ever worked? You know, like all of a sudden they're talking about themselves. You're showing an interest in them. You know, you're showing an interest in the property. And that's got me out of a lot of jams where I just turn it back on them. And then before you know it, they're like, you know what? You're good, kid. Yeah, all right. You know, it's just relationships, communication. It matters, you know?
Right. That and like the $100 handshakes, I think, right?
Yeah. That's what we do.
We're totally joking, by the way.
We give them a Tverdov housing hat with a $100 bill stuff inside.
We do not do that. We do not do that.
I have a question for you, though.
What?
If I'm a property owner and I have one of these properties subject to a DCA inspection, and I say, Pete, is it, and it's, you know, maybe you just acquired it, you're not really sure of the overall condition, and someone says, well, should I visit the property before the inspection to catch any issues, or should I just let the inspection occur because who knows what they're going to find, and I'll just fix it all when I get the formal list, or should I be more preventative and go in there beforehand?
I would say that depends on how much time you have. Right. It's like if you're a mom and pop landlord, you have one house, you work a W-2 job, you don't have time to go there during the week. You know, are you really going to go there on a Saturday or a Sunday? You might, you know, or maybe you're like one of these landlords who's like, you know, that's their job description. Like, I'm a landlord. I own, you know, 5 properties, blah, 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 blah. Like those people go and they check, like that's fine too. I don't think it hurts to go check, but I guess I would say if you've been at the property enough, you don't have to be there every 3 or 6 months to know like what really needs to be done after a while. Then you kind of know what's wrong. But like I go back to if your property's in really good shape, you got nothing to worry about. So I'll give you guys an example. So we picked up a management client. They bought 2 3-family houses right next to each other. And our construction company wound up renovating both of them. One of which, frankly, we should have like bulldozed. It got so expensive because that was like in 2021 where lumber like quadrupled in price and it was a disaster. But anyway, long story short, that 3-family that was a disaster is now a new construction house. So like when they did the inspection, you know, the violation list was like 3 things. One of which was like couldn't get into apartment 3 because they came when they didn't give us notice and they knocked and someone happened to answer the door to 2 of the 3 apartments. So they kind of got lucky. But the violation notice was like missing, you know, registration. One of them was like we didn't have the locks, the self-closing locks, because at the time, like, you know, 4 years ago, I didn't I wasn't thinking about that. Like now when we do construction for our clients, like I know like, hey, dude, this needs to be self-closing.
Like the apartment's not labeled with a sticker.
So anyway, what I'm getting at is like, I don't need to go look ahead of time at that building because that that's an A building. That's in great shape. The one we just did on Delavan, it's a 4-family house. Nice owner, but the building needs a little love. So that's going to have several pages of violations.
Yeah.
It's like I know that's going to need work. So to answer that question, I think it just depends on like how much you value your time, like whether you have time to go over there and try to get ahead of these things ahead of time.
Personally, I would say just wait till the inspection, because let's say you're paying a handyman to go and fix it. No need to do that twice. That's how I would approach it.
Yep, I would agree with that. Now, the last thing I would touch on about this, I guess it's a little bit of a plug, but you need to have someone who's going to do these repairs.
Yeah.
Right. It's like as a landlord, you always need to have a good team in place. And now, if you have a property management company, I'm shocked to know this, but like some property management companies like don't take care of that. Like the owner takes care of it, or like they're like, oh, that's your problem, Mr. Owner.
They're just there to receive the inspector.
I guess, yeah. So us, like our property management company here at Tverdov, like we knock out these punch lists all the time, and this is why, it does help to have a good property manager, because we have great relationships with these inspectors. So I know off the top of my head, a couple of times the inspector has gone, there's only been like 1 or 2 things wrong. Mm-hmm. And it's not me, Pete, going out in the field. It's like, sometimes it's like our college intern who's 19 years old wearing a Tverdov hat. And we're like, dude, tell the guy, we'll get him pictures tomorrow or the next day.
Yeah.
And boom, done. And we just got you the 5 years green card. So you need to have someone who could do these punch lists, and they all have to know what to fix. Because like I said, it's vague. These inspection reports are vague. That's why I do think you really want to try to be there with the inspector when they're doing that. You can't always be there, which I get. Like even we can't always be there sometimes. Because like Andrew said, they show up unannounced.
Yeah.
And sometimes they did the whole place, and then the owner gets a 5-page violation list. I'm like, dude, we didn't even know this inspection happened, because they don't tell anybody sometimes. So
I mean, they're good guys, but there is a sense of disorganization.
That's not the fault of the inspector, though.
No, it's any government entity. There's just a little bit of disorganization, Yeah.
No, I agree. But you got to make sure you have someone who could do these punch lists for you, and more importantly, get them right and handle
what they're looking at. Because they'll say 2nd floor bedroom left, window broke. You're like, okay, well, which bedroom is he talking about?
Right. It's a 3-bedroom apartment.
You're not really clear. I mean, you can call and get clarification, but it's better if you're there to
way better.
Yeah. Take notes, take a photo. And then as soon as the inspection's done, if you're lucky enough to have a management company like us, while it's fresh, write up the punch list,
Yeah, no doubt. I think that's it in a nutshell. Do you have anything else you were thinking of adding?
No, I can't think so. I would just say, like you commented on, a lot of the time in my experience, if you're showing the inspectors that you're cooperative, you're agreeable, that you also want to get these things fixed, that you're not fighting against them, that it's, they're willing to be a little bit more lenient. They're willing to kind of not let things go, but just be more understanding, They just want to see that you're taking some action and activity. Because I'm sure they deal with a lot of absentee owners that just don't address these issues.
Well, yeah, or the owners blame the tenants, I don't have key copies to my own building, and the tenants won't let me in the building.
Yeah.
So if your building's nice and you show you care and you're just trying to if you're trying to do the right thing, that's up to anything though. So.
Also, maybe you should just end it with how serious the fines can be. We almost dealt with that a couple of years ago with a former property manager, where we thought the abatements were done, and then they weren't, and then the inspector was like, "All right, you're going to face severe penalties now,
right?
Because we've come back again and again."
Yeah, so that's the other thing. If they have to come back a couple times, I think the first fine's $500 or $800, or I've seen $1,200, and some of it's not fair, guys. They just do this stuff unannounced. And they lose, paperwork gets lost. So I almost feel like when you own 3 units or more, you almost have to underwrite, I don't want to say fines, but slippage for these inspections. Cause you need to bake that cost into and
then similarly, they'll come back for a reinspection and they'll find additional new violations that they didn't include. That's rare, but that has happened sometimes.
I don't know if they can do that. I know they can't do that. So
we'll discuss that off air.
Well, I hope they haven't done that. Yeah. So what I'll close it with is if you go to our website, tvdhousing.com, I actually have a great blog article on how to pass a green card inspection that has like thousands and thousands of views, to the point people like call us up, like, can you help me pass the green card inspection? It's like, well, we that's not our business, but not, good luck. Read the article. And then there's also a YouTube video on our YouTube channel, Tverdov Housing, which if you subscribe, you'll see new videos. But one of the videos on there is how to pass a DCA inspection. So we try to give helpful information on this because it's important. And as a real estate investor, if you own one of these units, you're going to come across this inspection. So I hope this was helpful, guys. Appreciate you guys listening. And we will be back next month with yet another episode.
Thanks, Pete.
Thanks for listening to the New Jersey Real Estate Investor Podcast. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Until next time.